online. We still don't have a screen up over here.
Okay. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Audit Planning Committee. I am Councillor Paul Wynne, the Chairman of the committee. I'm obliged to inform you that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Could I also ask you to please ensure that mobile phones are switched off and to ensure that volume on your laptop is muted. To ensure the members of this committee and all points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you that I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. And if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. Members should ensure that they are present through the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item if you have not heard of the debate. Can members and officers introduce themselves each time before they speak, so those listening know who is speaking? I shall now ask the members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. I'll start with the members. Mark.
Mark Jones, Vice Chairman, Councillor for Boyne, Latin and Western Rim.
Councillor Joyce Barrow, Councillor for St Oswald.
Jeff Elmer, Councillor for Ellesmere Urban.
Councillor Gary Burchett, Councillor for Thagley.
Councillor Ted Clark, Councillor for Bunkum and surrounding areas, Sutton and Common Park.
Councillor Vincent Larmack. Councillor Roy Allcroft, Market Drayton East Division.
Councillor Alex Wagner, Baybrook Division. And Councillor David Bathmer, Councillor for Antidale and Shrewsbury.
Thank you very much. Now with the officers. Philip.
Philip Molyneux, Principal Planner.
Shannon Franklin, Technical Specialist Planning Officer.
Calvin Hall, Principal Planner.
Miranda Garrels, Solicitor.
And Shelley Davis, Committee Officer.
Thank you very much. Right, moving on to the agenda now. Oh, yeah. Apologies for absence. We've received Councillor Edward Towers, Roy Aldercroft is substituting. Right, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of November. Hope you can have a look at them. Thank you, Mark. Seconder.
Second.
Jeff Hamner, thank you. Any public questions? None received. Any disclosable pecuniary interests? No? Okay.
Mr. Chair, could I abstain from the minutes as I wasn't at that meeting, please?
Yep, certainly. Thank you, Vince. Right. Right, hang on. That's the right piece of paper. Right, we're going to item 5, Schoolhouse, Overton Road, Efton Heath. Presenting this, of course, yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I also say you whizzed through a bit quickly that whilst I don't have a disclosable pecuniary interest, I am the member for item 8, Knocking Hall Farm. So I will say a few words and then move to the back of the room.
Thank you, Vince. Okay, Shannon, thank you.
Okay, so this is the first application under consideration. I'll very quickly run through the plans for you. This is the location plan. And the next, please. The application is for variation of approved plans. So variation of condition 2 and condition 6. So the approved plan is on the left-hand side and the proposed plan is on the right-hand side. Next plan, please. This is the house types layout showing separation distances. Next plan, please. This is the affordable housing shown on the plans. They're in purple. They're labelled. Next plan, please. This is the tree removal and retention plan. Essentially, nothing is changing as part of the proposal. Next plan, please. Again, biodiversity and landscape. Essentially, nothing is changing as part of the proposals. Next plan, please. Proposed hard landscaping. Again, very limited changes. Next plan, please. This is just an example of the house type substitutions. The application is actually at committee due to a technicality with the land ownership as opposed to the technical details of the actual planning application. All of the changes proposed under the variation of condition 2 are very minor house type substitutions, some tweaking in the exact position of the houses. The alterations don't change the number of bedrooms, they don't change the number of dwellings, they don't change the type and tenure of affordable housing, nor any of the technical details to do with drainage, highways, landscaping, etc. The condition regarding noise has been included, just in the interest of completeness. The original condition refers to the approved plans, so it's included just to make sure that it refers to the new proposed approved plans. The application's at committee because since the determination of the first application, the applicant Cornovi have purchased the application site from Shropshire Council, and that purchase has been completed. However, the transfer of the land with the land registry is still pending. As such, on this legal basis, the council technically remain the registered landowner at the point in time of the committee. So because of the scheme of delegation, we brought it to committee in the interest of completeness. Officers are requesting that the decision is delegated to the interim planning development services manager, such that the relevant deed of variation to the section 106, which is already signed by the applicants, can be completed and the conditions can be amended as necessary at the point that it's ready to release. All the conditions on the original decision will be imposed on the second this variation decision. So again, the technical details of the application aren't actually changing as part of the proposal. It's just because of the land ownership details with the land registry that it's here before you. And that's it, really.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Before we move further, Mike, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
With apologies for lateness. Yeah, Mike Isherwood, member for Oswestry West.
Thank you very much, Mike. Okay, I'll move to the floor. Jeff, you've been to
I just query one thing. I'm sure you said this, I just heard you. The conditions were usually number 2 and number 6. But on the papers I have, it says number 2 and number 11.
It is number 2 and number 11. I'm sorry, I forgot the number for the noise condition as I was speaking. So condition 2 refers to the condition 2 refers to the approved plans.
No, that's fine.
Condition 11 refers to noise.
I wasn't even right. I just think Craig might be wrong, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. So, onto the floor now. Mark.
Yeah, I drove past the site the other day. They're starting to level the buildings and clear the site, and so I think we need to approve the plans as on the technicality that's therefore we just listen through. So I vote that we approve them.
Thank you, Mark. Good.
Give it a second.
Okay. No more comments. We'll have to have a vote. Miranda will call out the names. We've got to go through this process. Okay.
Unless you think it's likely to be unanimous.
I think it'll be
We
unanimous.
should take it in that basis.
Right, can we just have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Right, we'll move on. Thank you, yes. Thank you very much. Right, move on to item 6, proposing that the land will set the battlefields roundabout. Calvin is doing this one, so ready to go.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the erection of a food store in use class E, a substation with access, associated car parking and landscaping on land south of the Battlefield roundabout in North Shrewsbury. As background, members of this committee resolved to grant planning permission for a similar proposal at the August meeting last year, and permission was issued in October last year once the legal agreement was completed. That planning permission was subsequently quashed following a legal challenge brought by Tesco in January, and it was quashed in January this year. The current application is a new application, the main difference being that it's now proposed to provide an additional exit point for vehicles onto the A49. I'll draw your attention to the additional letters schedule relating to this item. They include alteration to the recommendation, which I trust members have read these. The delegated authority is granted to the Assistant Director to grant planning permission for any amendments necessary. An amendment to condition 22. The additional letters also refer to a letter of objection received recently from Tesco. They've commented in relation to the reference to Class E in the report, in relation to the heritage matters, in relation to referral to the land swap in the report, and highways issues. The late additional letters have also included the case officer response to Tesco's letter, and we've also had a response from the applicant Aldi as well, their agent, on the Tesco comments. And again, I'll assume that members have read those and digested those comments. Further, before I go on to the slides, we have had just a point of clarification from the highways officer as well, and I'll just read this one out. This was received this morning from the highways officer. The Tesco representation questions the highway authority's position regarding the MPPF, which states development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there will be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network will be severe. With regard to the above MPPF test, the highway authority concluded that the development is acceptable and does not warrant a highway objection. In this regard, the highway authority fully acknowledges and understands the two limbs of the MPPF test, in concluding that the impacts on the network are not severe and the impact on safety is not unacceptable. With regard to the design and safety audit process that is highlighted in the Tesco objection and responded to by Aldi's consultant, the scheme has already been subject to a stage 1 safety audit, as would be standard practice in connection with a planning application submission, and to ensure that the highway proposals do not give rise to fundamental issues that will prevent the development proceeding. It is standard practice also that as part of the detailed design, which is currently being undertaken, that a stage 2 safety audit will be carried out, and any identified amendments carried out to the design. The stage 3 safety audit is carried out following the construction of the highway works, and again is standard practice for any section 278 highway works. Condition 15, as set out in the committee report, is considered to adequately control the highway works, and states that prior to the development hereby permitted being brought into use or open for trading, the access/egress onto Battlefield Road and egress onto the A49 shall be laid out and constructed in accordance with the approved plans and in accordance with full engineering details to be first submitted and approved in writing by the local authority. So on to the slides. The location plan, it shows the location of the site with the site boundary in red. Members visited the site last August when the previous application was being considered. Next one. This is another location plan, and then next one will be some photographs. This is the top one is looking from the northern boundary of the site. The bottom one is looking north from within the site, from the south of the site. Next one. This one is the existing plan. You can show the existing features, which include a veteran tree, which is centrally located within the site in green, a pathway towards the southern side of the site that runs through from west to southeast, Next one, please. So this is the proposed site plan. Members will recall this from previously. The layout is identical other than the proposed additional egress. So the store would be along the northeastern boundary, main car parking to the northwest of that, the service yard to the south east of the store, the access and exit point from Battlefield Road on the left on the western side as shown, and then, as I say, the additional left turn only exit point onto the A49 at the northern part of the site as shown. Next one. These are the proposed elevations, identical to previously. Next one. The proposed floor plan. Next one. This is a close-up of the proposed site access, which shows how vehicles will get into the site either through a left-hand turn coming from the north or a right-hand turn coming from the south, and how they will get out of the site either to the north or to the south. Next one. And this is the proposed fundamental change to the current application, which shows the exit point onto the A49, which will be a left turn only and turn with a keep clear sign on the A49, and then traffic will proceed onto the Battlefield roundabout. Next one. Proposed boundary treatments include a post and rail fence shown in pink, and a timber fence 2.4 metres high as shown in blue. Next one. Landscaping. Existing vegetation on the site will be retained around the perimeter of the site. Landscaping would include native hedgerow and tree planting, and also wildflower planting, all of which shown green on this plan. The applicant's illustrations of how the store would look once constructed. Okay, that was the last one. So in terms of then the committee report and the officer appraisal, you'll note that the council's economic development team support the proposal in creating additional jobs and increasing the retail offer. They have indicated that the needs appraisal has indicated over provision of employment land, and the previous application provided for a legal agreement that required that the existing Aldi site is marketed for employment uses only for a 10-year period, and that the existing store is closed prior to the new one opening. This legal agreement would also be attached to the current application if permitted. The proposal would have some impact on the local highway network at times, and this is acknowledged in the report and by the highways officer. However, highways officers have concluded that this would not be such an impact that refusal could be warranted on highway grounds. The previous application was granted plan permission on this basis, and the current application would improve highway matters by providing a secondary access onto the site, from the site onto the A49, thereby reducing the amount of traffic that would join Battlefield Road. The proposal provides satisfactory protection of the veteran tree in the middle of the site, and there will be substantial buffer and landscaping areas to enhance the ecological value of the site, and conditions can be imposed to satisfactorily protect residential amenity in terms of delivery times and buffer zones. On to heritage matters, which was the subject of the successful judicial review challenge, which resulted in the quashing of the previous planning permission. So the site lies approximately 265 metres away from the registered battlefield for the Battle of Shrewsbury and within its setting. The NPPF stresses that heritage assets such as registered battlefields and Grade 2 star listed buildings are of the highest significance. The NPPF states that great weight should be given to the conservation of heritage assets when considering applications, and this is referred to in para 6.7.7 of the committee report. And members should be clear on this when making your decision, the importance of attaching great weight to the conservation of heritage assets. We have consulted Historic England on the application, and their response is as in the report, and they have said that on the basis of the information available to date, we do not wish to offer any comments, and that they suggest that we seek the views of our specialist conservation and archaeological advisors. We've done this, and their comments are on page 27 of the committee report. And in relation to the registered battlefield, the historic environment team say it's concluded that the proposed development would have the potential to cause a very low level of less than substantial harm at the very bottom of the scale of harm. Now, the NPPF requires that this harm is to be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including, where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. The public benefits are set out in the committee report at 6.7.8, and its officer's conclusion that the less than substantial harm to the registered battlefield would be outweighed by these benefits, and therefore the requirements of the NPPF are met. In relation to the officer appraisal and the comments just made, it's concluded that planning permission can be granted subject to the conditions as listed and subject to the section 106 agreement, which would tie in the marketing of the existing Aldi site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Calvin. Just before we go any further, Roy, did you leave the room then, or did you just close the door?
No, I just closed the door.
Thank you very much. I just saw you sitting down and thought, whoops. That's fine, thank you very much. Right, we have two speakers on this one. We have the local member, Councillor Dean Carroll. Dean, you've got 5 minutes if needed.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, committee, for considering this again for the second time. There's two principal arguments that I have against this planning application on this site. The first one is on the policy grounds, on the principle of the location, in that when this was put into the local plan back in 2015-16, when we approved the last iteration of the Shropshire local plan, it was identified for employment use and not for retail purposes. I do not believe that this site would have found its way into the plan at that point if it had been identified for large-scale retail use. The local residents, not only along Battlefield Road, but on the estates backing onto Battlefield Road, are not supportive of this use for this location, although they've had to come to accept over the course of the last 5 or 6 years that development will come to this site. They have accepted that on the basis that it was higher grade employment, light industrial or office uses of that type, as opposed to retail. The second serious concern I have on this, and I appreciate actually that Audi have brought in a change in this application to bring forward the exit slip lane onto the A49, although I have some concerns over its deliverability, and so I would ask perhaps that officers maybe could comment on that for the committee's benefit, on the deliverability of that exit onto the A49. Just anecdotally to pass on to committee, I'm sure many of you know this part of Shrewsbury, but some of you may not. Battlefield Road is an extremely congested route straight into the heart of Shrewsbury from both the A49 and the A53. If you're coming from Whitchurch, if you're coming from Market Drayton, if you're coming from anywhere in the northeast of the county, you have to come through Battlefield Island, and if you're going into the centre of town, probably down Battlefield Road. Now, in a previous planning application for a Windfall housing site, highways officers accepted that Battlefield Road was at or above capacity with the current sites identified in the local plan. However, with this changed use over and above what was originally intended in the local plan, I would contend that there would be a greater highways impact from a supermarket at this location than from straight employment use. And to give you one example,
talking to a highways officer yesterday about the dangers of speeding on Battlefield Road, particularly late at night, but in general about speeding on Battlefield Road. That highways officer's comment was, well, Battlefield Road's too congested at 90% of the time, certainly during the day, for anybody to speed. You're lucky to be able to move. So I appreciate that it's an on balance decision by highways officers that they don't believe that it meets the severe part of the test. I would contend and ask committee to think seriously about whether this use, as opposed to a straight employment use of the site, would actually tip the balance slightly into the severe test. I believe it does, but I would like committee to be able to hear, Chair, a response on whether officers believe that that exit slip lane onto the A49 is deliverable. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Dean. We have another speaker now. Ben Richards, like to come. Are you at the table or you're coming forward? Ben, you've got 3 minutes, okay? You're quite strict on time, so.
Good afternoon all, I'm Bryn Richards, I'm the Property Director. At your August committee, you approved our original application to relocate our Arlington Way store to the Battlefield Road site. We listened to the discussion between yourselves as committee members. One of those points related to whether a new egress could be created onto the A49. We hadn't considered that as an option previously, so we went away and looked at it. Following a review, including an independently reviewed road safety audit, we submitted this new application to accommodate the new additional egress off the A49. It doesn't result in additional traffic to the surrounding highway network. That will remain the same as originally set out. Your local highway officer and National Highways, formerly Highways England, have no objection to this proposal. The proposal is therefore sound. I've heard Councillor Carroll's objection to this application. We would not build a multi-million-pound store which is compromised by queuing traffic or dangerous that puts our customers off visiting again. You recognise this at the August committee. I am also fully aware of the repeated objections from Tesco, which are purely based on competition. Of course, it is important that all matters are properly considered by the planning committee. The application meets all policy objectives, including those relating to employment land, highways and heritage. The public has the right to access a deep discount supermarket, particularly in a time of rising living costs, and should not be monopolised by Tesco. The committee report sets out the process of considering any harm to the registered battlefield and associated heritage assets. Aldi concludes that their significance will be preserved. The last application was quashed on a technical matter, and this is being readdressed by your officer. There are significant benefits to this proposal. It will ensure the continued provision of a discount food store with good quality food at low prices. There are no alternative sites to deliver a fit-for-purpose store elsewhere. HGV movements are very low, which is appropriate adjacent to the nearby houses, unlike an industrial or logistics scheme. 100% of the store's heating will be from reusable energy. We will retain all 25 existing jobs and create 15 new jobs, generate £1 million of wages annually, and new jobs will be created at the Arlington Way site for employment end users. We are opening up the footpath, which is currently inaccessible. We will begin with 4 electric car spaces, which will be free, and future-proof a further 16, and include 12 cycle spaces. Aldi is committed to a Section 106 agreement to market its Arlington Way store for employment uses, creating further new jobs. Inquiries have already started to come in. The proposal complies with the objectives of the development plan and the MPPF. Will deliver sustainable development, and I ask you today to support this planning application. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right, before we come over to the floor, just coming back to Calvin about the entrance that Dean asked about. Is it deliverable? I'm not sure that you or Mark would be able to answer this.
I'm happy to defer to Mark.
Mark, have you got a speaker, Mark?
Sorry, would like to come up.
You've got Shelley's. Yeah.
Through you, Chairman, thank you, Calvin, for that. Yes, we do. I mean, if we go back to the previous meeting that was held where many of you were present, that the question was, I think, asked at that point whether or not, an access onto the A40 or an exit onto the A49 could be achieved. We went away with that with the applicant and the agent and discussed it, and we do believe it is deliverable. It does provide an element where people from that store have the opportunity, particularly if they want to go north from the site, to get onto the A49 to then travel in a northerly direction or a market rate direction. And obviously, if they're turning left, then they would come out onto Battlefield Road. So the right out manoeuvre from the site, which is one of the main concerns, and indeed one of our concerns, is to some extent mitigated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Calvin, you going to say about anything? Okay. Right. I'd like to just point of order here, I think.
A point of order, Chair, but thank you. Through you, just a quick emphasis really for the benefit of members. You heard just at the end of the planning officer's presentation where he said to you about the heritage issues, and that looking at that less than substantial harm, although it's at a very low level, that's then to be weighed against the public benefits, and he explained that to you. And it's at that point when you're conducting that weighing exercise, members, that you must give very significant weight to conserving the heritage asset. So within that balance, the planning officer talked about that earlier, but it's within that balance against those public benefits that you must give very great weight to conserving the heritage asset. So I just wanted us to be completely clear about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Before I open the floor, just one comment. I think the new access going to the 41 is a great improvement. Going across the traffic to go north, I live in Whitchurch, but that was a bit iffy in my mind. This is a good idea, common sense prevailed. But now I'll open to the floor, just to make my comment. Thank you very much. So, Gary first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the heritage aspects of the site, when the original A49 was constructed, the new A49 rather was constructed, I would assume that at that time the whole heritage aspect, the whole area was looked at, including the guesstimated edges of the battlefield site itself, which is to the north of the proposed site. So surely we've got on file the full assessment and archaeological surveys that were taken out when the road was constructed, and this land is identified as land for employment use. So we may have that over in file. Can we not use that as a reference point to this application?
Good point. Just, you did tell me you're going to that down. Yeah, I take Gary's point there.
So, thank you, Chair. There's clearly been development in the area in and around the registered battlefield over the last few years. Including, of course, the energy from waste facility as well, and a recent outline permission for units to the west of the energy from waste facility as well. Each of those applications have to be dealt with themselves on their own merits in relation to the specific impact that they may have on the battlefield. We have to go through that process each time we deal with an application for development, which is the case here, because although it is an allocated site, it's not until the application comes in that you can actually specify exactly what the impacts might be, because of the scale and the massing of the building, for example, and the impact on not only it's the physical element of the battlefield, but also its setting as well. This is what's happened here, that we've had heritage impact issues being looked at, and those issues being looked at by the specialists, including Historic England, who haven't provided any comments, and also our own team, who have indicated what level of harm they feel it would have. So there's been, in terms of the road, there's been the road there, there's been lots of other developments as well that's occurred over the last few years, and each of those have to obviously clearly take have due regard and given great weight to the need for the to conserve the assets.
Thank you. Bench indicated.
It's been with me, sorry, I think I turned you off, Chair.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know I could do that, I'll remember that. Obviously, this is one that we've had before, and I do remember, funnily enough, the biggest issue that we all had was about the ingress and going in, coming out, and that suggestion was put forward. I mean, the way I see it fundamentally is there's nothing here that would change my mind on the decision taken by that committee at that time. I think the inclusion of what was requested and suggested by members only serves to perhaps make this less contentious. So I will probably, depending on what other members say, almost certainly be supporting this, I think, because I can see nothing there that would change my mind. With regard to what Miranda said about it being a heritage asset and NWPF requires us to protect it, I mean, at the moment it's a field. If there's any heritage to be had, it's under the soil, because it's not visual. I mean, I would be slightly more concerned possibly about the church than I would about Headfield, because I don't think there are probably too many people. See, Miranda's getting ready with her finger there, moving around. So I'm not so worried about that. My personal belief is that the public benefit far outweighs what our own council officers have described as minimal impact to that asset. I don't see any reason not to go with this. As I say, I think it's got better than it was. I just wonder, though, obviously there's been some concern about the deliverability, which is being expressed by the local member, and needed some discussion about that. Would it perhaps not make sense possibly to condition it so that the access was put in before substantial works began on the site, because then actually it gives construction traffic the ability to leave safely, and if it's conditioned on that, then they can't actually build it until the road's put in.
Just going to Miranda first, did you want to say something?
Just through you, Chair, thank you. On that heritage point about the battlefield, it's important, yes, it is a field, it's a battlefield, but you have to consider the setting. So it is, as a registered battlefield, of the highest order of historic asset that should be protected, and therefore the setting of it, the wider setting, is extremely important as to how you understand and appreciate the setting of that battle and how and when that battle took place. So notwithstanding it's just a field and there isn't a building as a battlefield, it still merits the highest level of protection. And so I think we just need to be absolutely clear about that.
Can I just come back on that, Chair? No, I do appreciate that, but I think with the backdrop of the ERF and the roads, the roundabout, and everything that's been built up there now, that unless you're still on the developed side, looking out across it, or if you're still on the other side of the road looking out across it, I think that's probably not as it would have been 50 years ago already.
Thank you, Vince. Calvin, coming back to you about possible condition on it.
Yeah, if I could get Chair, and just going back to the other point as well, clearly, each time we have a development proposal put forward, which might have less than substantial harm, we then therefore need to carry out the balancing act, and some developments might have more public benefits than others, and so we have to, just because something has been permitted doesn't mean that everything else can be permitted. It's still got to go through that balancing act, and that's what we'll try to do with this Aldi one as well, set out what we think the public benefits are. So in terms of the access matters, there are a couple of conditions in the report 14 and 15 which set out the timing of the opening of the access roads. Are you suggesting that they need to be altered in some way? 14 is prior to the development hereby being permitted, being brought into use or open to trading, the access egress onto Battlefield Road and egress onto the A49 should be laid out and constructed in accordance with the approved plans. And then 15 is that the internal access roads and car parking and services shall be fully laid out prior to development being brought into use as well.
Condition of that already. Yeah, I think 14 talks about the plans to put them in being approved as opposed to them actually going in. I mean, I'd like to see them both completed before work starts on the site.
So thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall. In condition number 5 as well, development should be carried out in accordance with the details contained in the construction traffic management plan, and shall be adhered to throughout the duration of the construction period.
Well, then, Steve.
Well, I understand that, but it still doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be put in before the development started. It just has to be agreed and approved on the traffic management plan. If the traffic management plan can include the use of that spur coming off, then I would be happy with that. But it would need to be beefed up to include that.
Are we able to do that?
Yeah.
Do you want?
Well, if members are mindful to insist on wanting the road put into the construction vehicles used it, I would suggest we delegate to look at the conditions, because the case officer isn't here today. He knows what's in the construction management plan. We haven't got a copy of it in front of us. We need to compare that to what the other 2 conditions say, and if necessary, we can amend the conditions accordingly. If you're mindful to support the application.
Well, if offers, I'm quite happy to recommend that we delegate it to officers to look at to make sure that it happens before. I just think, during the construction period for stuff coming in and then stuff going out, there could be, as part of the traffic management plan, a one-way system in place that would enable it and would be less disruptive.
Thank you, Vince. Good point. I'll look into it. But I've got 3 or 4 more speakers now. David?
Thanks, Chair. I have the pleasure, I think, at this meeting to support the local member, Councillor Carroll. I agree with him that the impact of this development will be to create a lot more congestion in this area. We all know, everybody knows, you talk to people, and if you go up there at certain times of the week and days, it is very, very congested. It's standstill. And I think adding this development to that will have a severe impact. I think you could describe that as having a severe impact on the local traffic conditions, and I think that should be the basis for us to refuse this application. And everybody who lives up there knows that this is going to have a real bad effect, and most people, if you talk to, are concerned about it. I think the other thing is that we do need to consider this as a heritage asset. I think it's very, very important. I personally wouldn't like to see development here at all, but I certainly think that the reasons given in the report for balancing out, if you like, the benefits as against the loss of the heritage asset don't really add to much, because they list access to shops and supermarkets. Well, there's lots of shops and supermarkets in this area. The addition of one more, I don't think is going to make a great deal of difference, and will not be a major kind of increase in the assets available for people to offset the loss of the heritage assets. So I think that for those 2 reasons, I think we should not support this application. I think we should refuse it. The other thing I was going to ask in detail is that it's part of this proposal that if you're going out onto Battlefield Road, you won't be able to turn around. Will there be will it be actually people prevented from turning right onto Battlefield Road, or will they still have the option of turning right onto Battlefield Road if there's the egress there onto A49?
To you, I think can I just come back on the heritage point quickly in terms of what Councillor Lasma said, and then the officers need to pick up the traffic point. To be clear, this land that's the subject of the planning application is not said to be the heritage asset. The heritage asset is the registered battlefield, which is a little distance away. So there is no suggestion that the heritage asset would be lost. Simply that, if you look, according to the report, there would be a less than substantial, at the very lowest end of that, impact on the setting of the heritage asset. So the setting of the battlefield has a low level of adverse impact on it. But it is not that there is a loss of the heritage asset. That's a different phrase used in considering heritage assets, when you would actually lose the whole asset in some way, which is not what is occurring here.
Thank you, Brenda. Are we going to Mark or Kelvin? Could you answer that on highways?
I'll thank you, Chair. Can I just start off, please? Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, in terms of the registered battlefield, the extent of that is 265 metres away from the site, so it's a fairly fair distance away. And in fact, the council's historic environment team have said that the application site is a significant distance away from the battlefield. So there's no, we're not talking here about a physical impact, we're talking about an impact or potential impact on its setting, which the historic environment officer has suggested would be at a very low level of less than substantial harm at the very bottom of the scale of harm. In terms of the access considerations, can we go to the other one, please? Yeah, that one, yeah. The customers would have a choice as to how to exit the site. They would either go as previously proposed for the previous application, would either leave the site onto the Battlefield Road, or they would have the choice of leaving the site onto the A49 through a left turn only arrangement. And so that's the benefit of this application over and above the previous one, which was granted planning permission, which you would have a choice. You would, if you thought that a turning movement onto the A49, you didn't want to do it, or it was more difficult, then you would have a choice of using an alternative one. So the amount of traffic which was leaving the site will be split between the two. So that's the benefit over the previous application.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on to Joyce.
Thank you. Going back to the historical value and the relationship to the site, I think we ought to remember that Historic England have declined to comment, indicating that they have no issues with this. So that can hold a lot of weight for me. What I will say is Arlington Way, in my opinion, where it is at the moment, isn't an ideal site for this supermarket. It's by no way, the car parking is not big enough. 4.1.3, National Highways have no objections. They've looked at this, and I have to say the exit, as we know, has changed, and they have taken on board the committee's concerns, which I think is rather pleasing. This is an allocated site in the SAMDEV, and the principle of developing this site has been established. I think we have to remember that as well. Development, and this is slightly different to what you said actually, Kelvin. I think our highways officer has said in the report development would have net zero impact on traffic at peak times. As we know, as supermarkets, vehicles go in and out at all times of day. It's not all coming out at peak times, so I don't think that holds water really either. You can tell about the report. The Economic Growth Service supports the application, so they obviously feel it's good for the economic benefit of Shrewsbury. And there's no noise issues. Light pollution is addressed in the actual papers as well. And reading down 4.2.1, where the objections are, a lot of those points are actually alleviated. If you read the full report, a lot of those objections also don't hold a lot of water. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one more point that we mentioned. The actual ground itself is dropped below the road. It's a lower thing, that's been mentioned. Right, I'll move on to Ted.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, Battlefield Road is very busy. I do get a little anxious, but that's just me. I think I'm showing my age, really. We're now into subjective interpretations of what is severe, that's for the traffic, and also what is substantial in terms of the architectural impact. I'm becoming increasingly anxious about the way these things are going now. But nonetheless, I think it is an improvement. It clearly is an improvement to have the additional exit. And I share the view of the councillor to my left behind, that it ought to be constructed before the site is developed at all to ensure that it does take place. I still remain very concerned about the development line, just from the point of view of we're trying to shoehorn a lot of traffic onto the Battlefield Road, and I don't think, personally, I think we're going to live, if it goes through as it did last time, we'll live to regret it, unless we're crossing the Battlefield Road, in which case we might not.
Thank you, Chair. Joyce, you just knock off your mic, please.
Oh, sorry, yes, Chair. Sorry.
Mark?
Yeah, I'd like to support the application. I think Aldi always do quite a good job. We've got some lovely sites where I live. They look quite open. I quite like the walkway that walks down the side, and they've left the tree, which is good. I think it's at the lower end of the harm to the environment. And I think the road egress now onto the A49 is a good idea. That will obviously split the traffic. It's never nice turning right across the traffic. So that would probably cause congestion coming off the roundabout at some point in time if there's a lot of traffic coming out of there and they never get out. So I think all in all we kicked it around plenty, and I think it needs to go through. So I'd support it.
So you're proposing?
I'm proposing we support it. Yeah.
Vince?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. With do you want to bring on about?
I do. I thought we had cleared that, where I said I would be happy under the section mentioned. I think it was 3 or 4 that we delegate that to officers. They clearly had a lead from us on it, and it should be a constituent part of the traffic management plan for construction of the site. In other words, it should be there before they start construction.
Yeah, they're both happy with that, I think, Aldi. Yeah. Right, I'm proposing the table. Miranda?
So just to be clear, so members are clear what they're voting about, you're saying that within that construction management plan, you're going to want ideally the access constructed before the main food store, because once you start constructing an access, obviously that is commencing the development in any event. So we can't say before commencement, or we can tie ourselves in knots. So it's that access construction to be brought forward in the early part of the development of the site in accordance with the construction management plan. Is that, I'm just looking at the planning.
That's exactly what I'm saying, yeah.
That's just to be clear, thank you.
Okay. Nobody else to speak? Miranda will take the vote on it. Okay. We have to do this process.
I'll just read out your names, councillors, and ask you if you are for or against, please. Okay, and that's the proposal as outlined to you just now. Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Aldcroft?
For.
Councillor Barrow?
For.
Councillor Birchett?
For.
Councillor Elner?
For.
Councillor Clark?
Against?
Councillor Hunt?
For.
Councillor Isherwood?
For.
Councillor Rasner?
Against.
Councillor Wagner?
Against.
Councillor Wynne?
For.
Chair, that is 8 for and 3 against.
Thank you very much. That's been passed. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Is 7 Green Acres Rural Training Centre. And we'll just swap around while we get different officers in. Ready?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Mark Perry, the Technical Special Planning Officer. The submitted application is for the erection of 2 single-storey blocks which will provide 8 apartments. Like these. There are 2 letters of update received. I understand both of these have already been forwarded to members, and I think we've got paper copies of one of them as well, which was taken sort of later. The planning application has been submitted by Shropshire Council, who also own and run the adjacent Green Acres farm. Next slide, please. This is a working farm that is used as a day service for adults with learning difficulties. The extent of Green Acres farm is shown outlined in blue on the location plan, with the application site identified in red. Fenimore Lane runs north-south with the application site and Green Acres to the west. The village of Walford Heath lies to the south. The proposed apartment will be located directly to the north of Green Acres, to the north of the application site, and to the west there are open agricultural fields. To the south, directly opposite the farm, there are two neighbouring dwellings. Just make out there. Links those. The two blocks will be positioned parallel to one another with a communal area at its centre. 6 of the apartments would have 1 bedroom and 2 would have 2 bedrooms. Next slide, please. The apartments will be for occupation by adults with learning difficulties, and these will be occupied as affordable dwellings rented from a registered social landlord who will be acting on behalf of the council. In addition to the 8 apartments, there will also be an additional unit which will be used to provide overnight staff accommodation along with a laundry and communal lounge. Next slide, please. The development will provide a level of care and supervision required by individuals with learning difficulties, but it will also provide them with an appropriate level of independence. The application site is in an open countryside location, and therefore in respect of policy CS11 of the core strategy, there is conflict as the site is not within or adjoining a settlement. There is, however, a proven county-wide need for what is a specialist type of residential accommodation. Officers recognise that there is not a specific need in this parish for this type of accommodation. Members will note from the report that there is already a need for specialist accommodation in Shropshire. There are currently 23 adults with learning difficulties and 26 with mental health needs that have to live out of the county due to the limited availability of suitable accommodation. There are 69 individuals waiting for supported living accommodation to become available. The demand for such accommodation is forecast to continue growing. The apartments are not an extension to the Green Acres farm, and the 2 sites will be operated separately. However, the site is considered by officers to be appropriate because of the unique situation whereby the existing facility will allow residents of the proposed specialist accommodation to engage in the activities that it provides. The function of the existing Greenfields farm will be of direct benefit to those living in the proposed apartments, and this is a material consideration which officers consider can be awarded weight. The apartments will have their own separate vehicle access and its own parking area, which officers consider to be adequate in size to accommodate carers and visitors to the site. Pedestrian path would then link the apartments to the farm. Access to the site is via a straight stretch of Fenimore Lane, and there is a condition recommended which secures the provision of additional passing place on this single width section of road. Externally, the apartments will be finished with a mixture of brick, render and stone to a slate tiled roof. It's considered that the provision of the specialist accommodation adjacent to the established facility for adults with learning difficulties is a material consideration which outweighs its location away from any recognised settlement. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report, and the applicant entering into a memorandum of understanding to ensure that the proposed accommodation remain affordable for occupation by those with learning difficulties. The memorandum will also establish a formal community liaison group to ensure that if any problems arise, then they can be quickly remedied. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. We have 3 speakers on this item. So to start with Adrian Thompson. So have you got a mic there? You're all ready to go. You've got 3 minutes. Pretty sharp on time, so I'll give you time and stuff, all right?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I sent a letter to you all yesterday, setting out as clearly as I could why this application should be refused. I hope that letter has been of help to you in defining what the pivotal issue is before you today. I ask you to refer to that letter again now as I summarise the main points. The need for supported living accommodation, as identified by the applicant and by your officers, does not fall within the scope of the definition of local need affordable housing as set out in the council's own supplementary planning document. As such, the proposal cannot comply with the relevant development plan policies. The transport statement produced by the applicant acknowledges the site would be very difficult to access by foot, bicycle or public transport. I see no reasonable prospect of that happening. Where will the staff, if they can be found, be coming from? Look, for example, at the mismatch between the hours of the bus service and what the applicant tells us are typical shift patterns. Access to the development would in fact be car-based, and this would generate significant levels of traffic, especially for this quite rural location. As such, the proposal is again contrary to the development plan. The applicant seeks a quiet rural location. They have not disclosed any details about the site search they carried out to show why a more accessible quiet rural location cannot be found on the edge of a town or village. Therefore, no weight should be given in your decision to the assertion that Greenacres is the best or only suitable option. The only material consideration left before you to weigh in the balance against the conflict with the policies of the development plan is the possible use of the rural training centre facilities by the prospective residents in the evenings and at the weekends. The strength of this link is hard to define and difficult to predict, so at best it can only be given limited weight. No one is questioning how worthy in itself is the delivery of more supported living accommodation. In my professional opinion, that alone is not sufficient to justify the development of a facility in a location where normally there is a strong presumption against new development, especially new residential development. I therefore respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. Okay, next we have Councillor Steve Gregory, Bashchurch Parish Council. We won't start the clock yet. Don't worry.
Thank you.
You've got 3 minutes, Steve, so we'll start.
Okay. Thank you. So, as you say, I'm from Bashchurch Parish Council. We did have a process of public engagement, and colleagues from the council came along to talk. But we heard that local residents remained uneasy and anxious about such a development in the local area. But it wasn't for the reasons that you might think. So it wasn't that they were opposed to the development in terms of not allowing local people to come and live there, but it was more about actually the isolation. So I'm going to major really on some of the concerns of the parish council. So for us, the fact that it's remote and isolated isn't really acceptable. So if you think about people, and it is people with a learning disability, not difficulty, and they're two fundamentally different things. So it's our feeling that there are other possibilities. So more, into the centre of somewhere like Bashchurch, for example, which is where I live, rather than being isolated. So in the 1990s, this would have been a great scheme. In 2022 and beyond, it really is outdated and outmoded, to be honest with you. So for me, I think if you go back to some of the great philosophers around supporting people with a learning disability, they'll talk about things like social imagery and interpretation of the public in terms of shaping and developing mindsets. So you're lucky really in Shropshire that you had an institution for people with mental health needs, but you never had one for people with a mental handicap or learning disability. So people's assumptions, so society will shape their views on where people live. And actually most of us don't live, work and play in the same environment, do we? So the fact that officers think that's a benefit, actually it's a disbenefit in many ways, because what you're doing is enhancing that segregation and isolation. So I would ask people to just think about that. So again, I think the other big thing really, which is, and you'll be aware of this if you say yes to this proposal, that there's a huge national inquiry into a facility called Winterbourne View, which was a rural setting for people with learning disability, and it went badly wrong because people couldn't have oversight of that facility. And the 4 recommendations, one of them was about making sure that such services are accessible and visible to the general public, as well as those that regulate and inspect such services. So for me, I think it's important that you do think about, are you really valuing people when you think about this proposal? It's not just the, if you like, the technical aspects of planning, but the philosophical and values-based approach to planning that I'd like you to think about. We as a parish council are very supportive of any such development.
Steve, you've got your time, I'm afraid.
Okay, but not in this area.
Right, thank you very much, Steve. Right, we go to our local member now, Councillor Bardsley. You have 5 minutes, Nick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing this application to come to committee. This is a difficult application for you to determine. I think we're all agreed that this sort of scheme has been very well established and supported in all our minds. Officers in adult services made very excellent presentations and came to events, came to special meetings of the parish council, and I think we all support the principle of providing supported living accommodation, and I don't disagree in any way with the officer's report in terms of the need for this accommodation in this part of Shropshire. Personally, I would be very enthusiastic about supporting this need and this development in this part of Shropshire. The key issue is location, members. You've heard from the representatives of local people, you've heard in writing from Mr. and Mrs. Rees, and you've heard from Adrian Thompson this afternoon on behalf of Peter Minkin. Powerful objections in my judgment. And you've just heard from Steve Gregory, who, as well as being Vice Chair of Fast Church Parish Council, has many, many years experience as an NHS professional in precisely this field. So I do ask you to take on board his particular concerns. Putting it bluntly, can we take the risk of perhaps inadvertently approving the site of another Winterbourne view? That was also a quiet rural location and indeed owned and managed by what was at the time a respected local care company. I think I just want to touch on another point about potential other sites. Some of you will know that there is plenty of land in Bastchurch itself available for development of this sort, also in Wrighton 11 Towns. Both of those villages already support this sort of accommodation on a small scale provided by Condover College. In any of these locations, the development could be provided as an exception scheme, and I'm quoting now from CS11, in or adjoining a recognised named settlement. So one has to ask, why is this a suitable site when there are really so many others that would fit the bill? I'm very reluctant in what I'm saying now, and rather sad that I have to support the objections made by local residents and by the parish council, and urge you not to approve the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nick.
Mark, do you want to conclude? Any comments?
Over the floor? Not at the moment. Okay, thank you. Over the floor, Joyce indicated, so Joyce.
Thank you. Just a question. Is that actually a reason to refuse an application? Isolation of this site for the individuals that be in there. Is Winterbourne and what happened there something we should take into consideration?
Sustainability. Yeah, in terms of location, yeah, we're only sort of in terms of planning reasons, it'd be the sustainability of the location, rather sort of the activities of and history of similar sites, I suppose. So, yeah.
Can I think about?
Yes, please.
When you think of sustainable, you think about access to doctor surgeries, etc., etc. So, what in this instance do you mean by sustainable?
Sustainability is it's a full package of things, really, and the accessibility for visitors, staff, how they get there, public transport. So it's a full range of items, as well as access to services and the facilities, which in this instance we are a little distance away from those, and it would be a reliance on primarily on the use of the car. There's a bus stop, but I think 7 minutes walk away, and as I said previously, it's
Okay. One last question, please, Chair.
Okay.
So, in your opinion, is it sustainable?
I mean, policy CS11 identifies those locations that are sustainable, and that's why it references within or adjacent to settlements. So I think in this instance, the key driver for the scheme is the fact it would be closely associated with an existing enterprise that already caters for such young adults. So it's
I've got to come back, sorry, that
Okay.
sounds like a politician's answer. So is that a yes or no, in your opinion? Is this sustainable? Is it sustainable development? Sorry.
Can I just comment? It's a balance. This is finding balance. It's not adjacent to a recognised settlement. Officers acknowledge that. However, there is an existing business on site to which the people relate. So there was a weighing up in the planning balance, the material considerations. Officers concluded that on balance they could support it. It's up to you as members to weigh it up against what you consider issues and the local plan policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Move on to the next one. Roy?
Thank you, Chair. One of the things with NHS policy on learning difficulties is that they are very keen to integrate people suffering from this particular condition. This doesn't integrate anybody, it keeps them isolated. They go from their accommodation to the farm accommodation, whether they get out and about, whether they could actually walk out of there and go into what you might call a normal area is questionable. They don't get a chance to interface with members of the public or take part in normal activity, and for that reason I can't support it.
Thank you, Roy. Vince?
Thank you, Chair. It is an interesting one, this, and I understand why there is a thought of putting accommodation there. A lot of these people, young people, work on the farm. Will be one of my questions is, will the housing be designated for people that work on that facility, or will it be used for general purpose? I don't accept the assertion of this being a bit like Winterbourne View. Castlebeck Care ran that, and they didn't run it very well. And it was only the result of a whistleblower that made people understand that the staff that were working there were abusive, inappropriate bullies. And we all know what bullies are like just at this moment in time. I'm also a little bit concerned when we make statements that we shouldn't create another one, Winterbourne View. If we did that, we'd never build another one, because the issues were inside the home. They weren't because of its location, they were because of the mismanagement and the lack of oversight on the staff within. And I don't think for 1 minute that Shropshire Council would allow that to happen as Castlebeck did. So I'm striking that completely from my deliberations on that, because I think those are bordering on unreasonable statements, to be honest. Because as I say, we'd never build anything anywhere if we were worried about what went on inside it. And that's just the fact of it. We do have a need within adult safeguarding for facilities. People who have learning difficulties, that manifests itself in many different ways. For example, there are youngsters with autism who don't like to spend a lot of time around lots and lots of people. In fact, they'd rather just see 1 or 2 people that they spend all their time with, and animals like farm animals, for example. It shouldn't be naturally assumed that the people that may be living there, should it gain permission, would want to go to nightclubs, pubs, shopping, to the cinema. Perhaps they don't. I don't know. I mean, I am struggling with the location a little bit, and I think to be honest, I'd like to know more about the conditions. I mean, you know, just saying educational learning difficulties encompasses so many different things. I mean, is it specifically for people who don't mix very well with the public? You know, and if it is the case, then I would want to be reassured that it's not a way of hiding them away or sweeping them under the carpet. I'm sure it isn't. I'd also like to know a little bit, really, I suppose, about you know, whether this is just, it's there, there's a facility there, it saves us transporting these people to and from the facility, saves Shropshire Council a bit of money, because I don't think that should be in the factoring either. But I'd be interested to hear what other people have got to say.
Thank you, Vince. David?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I very much support some of the things that Councillor Hunter said, but I'd point out members to look at page 59, 6.3.6, where it says the applicant states that the young people who would benefit from the provision of green acres have all been assessed by the local authority as benefiting from a rural location. This is down to a number of factors, including aversion to crowds of people, feeling stressed by noise, and the need for safe outdoor space they can use in emotional regulations. So quite clearly, the location is a very important one to the running of this and the sort of support that it's intending to provide. And therefore I think that, you know, that we should be supporting this as a very valued development.
Thank you, David. Gary?
Well, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Richard. I find myself in the horrible position of actually agreeing with Councillor Basman. 6.3.6 does clearly state that this accommodation is for young people who have got issues around crowds. As Shropshire Council, as the officers already pointed out, we have numerous people on the list who will need supported accommodation. So those people, if Bastion has got that much land available, we can build an urban or slightly more urban settlement within pastures for people who are happy with crowds. This is, they specifically pointed out in their summation why they want this to be a rural location. Also, the objection regarding traffic flows, there are 8 units and 1 staff unit. The 8 units are all for people with special needs who are very unlikely to have their own vehicle. The staff, there'll be 1 or 2 staff, possibly 3 at the most, on the site at any one time. That's an increase of 3 cars per 8-hour shift, which is only 9 cars a day. So I'd like to see what the actual traffic movements on the road are currently, and how much of a percentage an extra 9 cars a day would impact on the Fellermere Lane.
Can you feed on the impact of that, Mark, please?
So the traffic, yeah, paragraph 6.4.5 of the report sets out how traffic movements to and from the site would increase from currently 44 two-way traffic movements a day to 80 two-way movements per day. So obviously some of those would be obviously staff coming and going and the shift patterns that you can see set out in the report. Obviously there'll be greater impact at the peak times when there is that shift change, but generally the road network in that area is rural, is quiet. So in terms of any harm caused by that increased traffic is likely to be very, very low.
Thank you, Mark. Mark?
Yeah, I was a bit early today, so I went and drive down there, and it looks a reasonable site. I mean, as you can see on the map, it's a straight road, so if there is passing place, I don't see too much of a problem. What I did notice is just before that on the left, there's I think it's called Awkward veterinary supplies. They seem to have quite a few vans that are going up and down there, I presume, to get onto the main road, but it's not far from the main road to get to that site. Probably 100 metres from the wall, but you turn into the left turn, and then it's probably 300 metres to that red square up the top. So it's not a huge area. There's no fast bends there to traffic, so I don't think that's too much of an issue. I live in Caboyne and Whittington, which is not far from the Derwent, and I had the pleasure of going to see quite a few people at Derwent over the years, and it's lovely to see how they grow together. When you hear the stories how they come in as very shy children, go out, obviously there's more Downs children than disabled, and they go out as adults, and I think some of that is due to the fact that they're there learning together, and they're seeing Fred do well or Julie do well, and that gets them going. So I think this nice little community might be good. obviously I did listen to what the parish councillor said, very stirring words, and he did an excellent job. But then he mentioned Winterburn, but I think Vince has quashed that a little bit. And hopefully, you know, as a corporate parent for the council, I don't think I could go and look myself in the eye and refuse this. And I think it would be a lovely rural setting if I had children who was disabled like this. I think it would be a nice setting for them to go to, so I would support it.
Okay, Miranda.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I think it's important just to be clear that as a planning committee members, you do need to think about the planning land use issues of this application before you, rather than some of the issues that have been brought up around the nature of the usage inside the development. That's not actually a planning land use matter, so you need to be thinking about the site, the impact on the traffic, the location in relation to, you know, other settlements, other amenities, its sustainability and so forth. You know, there obviously is information in the report about the need and the nature of the use, and that you have that before you as alluded to by Councillor Burchett. But I think it's the planning land use issues that you really need to focus here as being the material planning issues, and the need for this accommodation, but you know, whether that need is met in this location. So those are the issues for members to focus on.
Thank you, Miranda. Ted?
Thank you, Chair. It is, I accept that. Listen with interest to the arguments from those against and the debate that's gone on since. I appreciate it is clearly a very isolated rural area, but in my mind, it's exceptional in this case that we do, that it should be considered to be allowed because it's adjacent to a long established and very sympathetic facility, which I think will do nothing but improve the quality of life for the proposed tenants that are going to be in there. So I do support it.
Thank you, Ted. Vince?
Well, based on what Miranda said and from what I heard, she's absolutely right. We are a planning committee. We're not a social justice committee or anything else. But we do have professional officers who have made a recommendation based on what they see as planning policy. I happen to agree with them, so I'm going to move we accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Vince. Joyce?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Joyce. Any other comments? We've had a good debate on this.
Can I just add in,
Jeff?
I really don't understand that it will be a significant increase in traffic or a significant impact on neighbours, basically.
Could you repeat that, please?
I don't think, the letter here from David Rees states there will be a significant increase in traffic movements. I can't quite understand how that would.
There's not going to be many traffic movements.
No. On that basis, I'd also like to support this.
Thank you very much. Right, I'd like to debate Miranda.
I should just have added to my comment, and just for completeness, so it's absolutely clear, it's the planning land use issues, but obviously the planning policy, which you've had outlined to you by your planning officer and was also alluded to by the public speaker. So I think those are the key issues for the planning committee.
Thank you. Okay, we haven't got any more speakers on this. We'll take it to the vote. Miranda, you can go through Miranda. Thank you.
I'll read your names, Chair and all committee, and please say for or against. Thank you. Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Aldcroft.
Having listened to the debate and your comments, for.
Councillor Barrow.
For.
Councillor Burchett.
For.
Councillor Elmer.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Isherwood.
For.
Councillor Vasma.
For.
Councillor Wagner.
For.
Councillor Wynne.
For.
Chair, that's unanimous.
Right, thank you very much. Good debate on that one. Saying a lot of things from the debate. Take over at the time. So now we'll move on to the next one, which is item 8, Knockinghall Farm. And we'll swap over tables, so we'll just let the room clear a bit and let officers swap over. And let some people in, some people want to listen to it. That's right. Next Simon. some people wanted to come into this debate, so that's what we're waiting for. Okay. Right, Philip's doing this one, so thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application is made in full and is accompanied by an environmental statement and proposes an extension to an existing intensive broiler enterprise, Knocking Hall Farm, Knocking, for the installation of 2 further broiler houses for the housing of an additional 100,000 broiler birds in site. The current site contains 2 broiler houses housing 100,000 birds in site. The application is considered Schedule 1 development in accordance with Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations as set out in paragraph 6.11 of the report before you. And as it's Schedule 1, committee consideration is mandatory. Members' attention is drawn to the update sheet and the further letter of objection received from a member of the public. I'd also like to draw to your attention paragraph 6.34 of the committee report. It refers to no significant harm. This is on the historic environment. To be clear, this means no harm to the significance of the historic landscape in relation to the environment owing to the site's location, topography, and the fact that the proposed poultry sheds will be cut into the ground adjacent to the existing site at the rear. There will also be further landscape mitigation in the form of tree planting. Application site is hatched in red on the slide. Go ahead. And located alongside the northern side of the existing intensive poultry enterprise, which you'll see to the south, 2 existing sheds. Next slide. This is the location plan in more detail. Next slide, please. Block plan showing the layout of the proposed the additional 2 broiler units located directly behind the existing 2 broiler units and an existing biomass shed. Public highway access into the site will be obtained directly off the B4396 public highway, from which the existing driveway leads to the site. Next slide. Elevations and floor plans of the proposed development, which is typical of a building used for this type of agricultural industry, and is to be clad in dark green steel metal cladding, and reference to the dimensions and specifications of the building is referred to in paragraph 6.24 of the report before you. The application also includes 5 feed bin silos to be installed on site alongside the proposed units. Next plan, indicating landscaping. The existing landscaping is proposed for strengthening. The site itself, as I've indicated, is to be dug into the ground at the rear of the site. The existing site forming part of arable land in obviously the control of the applicants. There now follows some photographs of the existing site. Next one, please. Next one. And that's the existing site looking towards it from the proposed site where they're proposing to build 2 new buildings. As indicated above, the application is for an increase in broiler production on site, increasing number of birds from 100 to 200,000. The site will be subject to an environmental permit operated and managed by the Environment Agency. The applicants have already obtained a variation to increase production on site from the Environment Agency. Amended plans were received during the processing of the application, which now proposes air scrubbers
to be installed on the end of each of the 4 broiler units. These will process ammonia and dust emissions produced on site. Manure produced on site as a consequence of the increased production is proposed to be removed off-site during the clean-out after each bird cycle to an AD plant. Members will note that the 2 letters of objections is referred to in the report and the late submission as indicated on the update sheet. It is considered issues raised could be adequately addressed as outlined in the report, with conditions attached if members are mindful to support the application. Suitable conditions are suggested in the Appendix 1, conditions attached to the report. It's noted the local parish council raised no objections. Members' attention is drawn to paragraphs 6.25 and 6.26 and landscaping issues, as development of this nature is considered significant, and thus the requirement for additional landscaping, and this matter is referred to in condition number 6 as the suggested condition in Appendix 1 on this matter. As indicated earlier in the presentation, the applicants have proposed air scrubbers to be installed to each of the broiler units on site. While it is not considered that these have a significant noise impact on the surrounding environment, the noise assessment forming part of the environmental impact assessment statement in support of the application did not consider this matter, as these have been a late addition to the application in consideration of ammonia produced on site. However, it is considered that this matter can be addressed by an addendum to the noise report to cover this matter as required. I must add, the addendum has been received yesterday and is currently with our regulatory services officers for them to consider. Therefore, on this account, if members are mindful to support the application, it is recommended that this matter will be delegated to officers to ensure a satisfactory response from our noise specialists with regards potential noise created as a result of these air scrubbers. As members will note, as I've already indicated, this is an application subject to an environmental statement. Other amenity issues are considered acceptable as discussed in the report. Also, public highway and transport issues acceptable as referred to in the report. Ecology matters as discussed in section 6.4 of the report are also considered acceptable, subject to satisfactory conclusion from our regulatory services on the air scrubbers and the noise, because obviously they are taking in dust and ammonia produced on site. Therefore, in conclusion, the environmental statement in support of the application on balance is considered acceptable, and the recommendation is one of a delegated approval to the Assistant Director, subject to satisfactory submission of an addendum to the noise report in relation to the air scrubbers, and the conditions as outlined in Appendix 1 attached to the report, and any modifications considered necessary by officers to these conditions in consideration of the proposed air scrubbers. That concludes my presentation on this application, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Right, the local member wants to say a few words, then we'll come back to the room. Thank you, Vince.
I do. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, poultry units at times can be very contentious, especially the larger ones, where you're talking 500,000 to 1 million birds. This is not one of those units. It's currently 100,000. Hard-working local farming family. Part of their business plan was to increase the size of this to put in the extra 2 units. I know that they've spent a significant amount of time, probably getting on for a year now, working with officers, in particular Matthew Farmer, who I'd like to thank. I think some of the members know who Matthew is, because the government decided in their wisdom that they were going to bring out new recommendations, for example, the air scrubbers and ammonia emissions. And they've waited and trod ground
and worked with officers, as I say, particularly Matthew Farmer, to come up with something that meets the newly released guidelines from government. I don't think either that any of us have ever seen one of these that's actually supported by the local parish council. Normally toys are flying out of prams about these. But the access to the main road, which you turn left on to go up towards the Wolfshead roundabout, and then the Nestcliff bypass, I think any members who've driven that road know that it's a long, straightish piece of road that's not heavily trafficked, apart from perhaps in the mornings for work and in the evenings coming home from work. And it's actually ideally suited for vehicle movements to go up and down those. They don't go through the village at all. The other thing I think that's worth noting as well is that the Lloyd's animal feeds mill is about 5 miles down the road. So, you know, with half an eye on producing good quality protein that most people in this country can afford, especially in these difficult financial times, where the journey for the food is not a particularly long one, I think should be supported. I do hope members can support this. As you can see from the report, the applicants have jumped through hoops, sometimes encouraged, as you would expect with any applicant, but they have done it. They've satisfied everything, including the Environment Agency, and I hope members will be able to support this. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Vince.
I'll move to the back of the room now.
Okay, there's a seat there. So open up the floor, Gary's indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points I want to clarify, if you don't mind. 4.3 Historic England, their report was in October 2019. We're now in 2022. Is there a reason why it's taken that long? I've got another couple of, should I give all at once so you can answer the whole lot? They've also mentioned footpath 7 from the footpath people, that it passes very close to the buildings. Can we put something in conditions to ensure that's kept fully accessible the whole time of the development? And one of the objections is on 4.15 is vehicle movements and light pollution. Is there any way we can mitigate the late night vehicle movements and light emissions after a certain time? Or that's all about.
Okay.
Okay,
yes. Okay. Now, in response, yes, this application has been in for some time. You'll have noted the reference number is 19.
Right.
My assistant director isn't very happy how long it took to determine this one. However, it is because of what has already been pointed out now, ammonia. Hence the reason that now towards the end, after having put pressure on them, that I've got to make a determination on this application. They introduced the air scrubbers, and hence the reason for the recommendation with regards to the noise issue and regulatory services. So that is why it took a long time. Historic England have raised no objections. The footpath issue is an issue that I recommended an informative notice attached. Having consulted with our rights of way people, they raised no objection, but they requested an informative as attached, reminding the applicants that the footpath cannot be obstructed, or they have to put in for a footpath diversion. And so that's addressed that. Light pollution, yes, I noted that in one of the letters of objection. That is covered by condition. However, the existing site, which I think the complaint is referring to, also has a condition attached to the decision notice with regards external lighting. So if there is an impact on amenity, first we'd look at it through the condition as attached to the previous plan approval, and we'd have to work in conjunction with our colleagues in regulatory services as to whether there is an amenity issue as a result of external lighting. Vehicle movements. Our highways have raised no objection. However, there is one issue with vehicle movements I think is of concern, and that is nighttime deliveries of food. It was pointed out earlier that the feed mill is only just up the road, which is quite right. So this, however, a noise with food deliveries is the blowing of the food out of the HUV into the feed silos. So I've recommended a condition which you'll see attached in the appendix to the report with restricting delivery times.
Joyce.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll make it quick. I've listened to the local member and also I've read what the county council have had to say. And I think all the conditions cover the issues that are there that could cause problems. And therefore, I am happy to propose that this is accepted.
Thank you, Joyce. We've got David to speak and then Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a point on 6.2.5. About officers consider on balance that the proposed development is considered to be acceptable with regard to potential effects of landscape character. And then there's and visual immunity, and that further landscape mitigation will assist. Is that further landscape mitigation, is that being proposed, or is that conditioned, or I just would like further information about that?
It has been proposed, but officers, when determining applications, also like to look at landscape enhancement. Now then, when the application was submitted to start with, they would want extra tree planting to absorb ammonia. However, now with the air scrubbers, it's turned that around. However, I'm still of the opinion that this site does need landscaping. There is landscaping put in relation to the previous 2 sheds, but it's in its infancy. Although well screened from the road as driving past, because there's existing line of trees to the front and the existing sheds. To the rear, the site is relatively open, but we don't think landscaping is absolutely necessary in consideration of the historic landscape. It's just a visual, and also to encourage and improve biodiversity.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I'll second Joyce. It's a good site. I must admit, when it first got put up, I didn't even realise it was there for about a year before I passed it, because it takes some seeing on the main road. That bank of trees that you can see the shadow, it's probably about 100 yards off the road, so it's a difficult site to see, which is good. And you can't really smell it as you go past either, so it's a good site. Most of the processors now want people who are currently producing chicken to put more sheds up rather than have new producers. So obviously these must be good producers because they've got a new contract to produce more. What I would say to the committee is that the ammonia scrubs put something like £100,000 a piece onto the cost of building these, so it is starting to get unviable for people to put more sheds up. Currently we import more than 20% of our chicken. It's a bit of a difficult one to weigh up because we do import white meat, but we export dark meat. So we import the chest and the breast, but then we export the wings to eastern foreign countries. And also, I think it's a good site, and I think that we need to be more, and that there's going to be more chicken sheds to be put up in the future, because the Nando's and KFC have signed a petition to get producers to reduce the number of birds in each shed by probably about a third. So, and that's going to be by 2026. So I've got a friend who produces 1 million birds a year, and he will be going down to 600,000. So there is going to be probably more sheds in the future. So just beware of that. So, but I support this. Good producers, good family farmers. So it needs to go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Interesting points they put out, we nobody knew about. There you go. Any more comments? Otherwise, we'll go to the votes. Okay, Miranda.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell me for or against members, please? Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Allcroft?
For.
Barrow?
For.
Birchett?
For.
Elmer?
Support.
Clark?
For.
Hunt? Oh, sorry, your local member. Isherwood?
For.
Basper?
For.
Wagner?
For.
And Wynne.
For.
That's unanimous with the members voting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to item 9, appeals and appeal decisions. Philip, have you got anything to say?
Yes, officers are obviously very busy. Matter of appeals decisions to go through. overall, pleased with the results. Overall, I don't expect to win everyone. We clearly haven't here, including the one on Low Hill Road at Ware. I also need to amend. It says here costs awarded, no cost. So there was cost application. However, I see that is included in the appendix, the cost decision for that one. Disappointed. There was one that's below it. Was also allowed. The inspector clearly disagreed with officers. And then another one that was allowed was the one alongside the Neil Brace Retail Park in Shrewsbury here for houses in Council 10 o'clock, so what I believe that. Otherwise, very good. I'm particularly pleased with actually the last one on the decision, which is only a householder application, relatively straightforward looking at, but I like the fact that the inspector actually used the word subservient. And it's a word I'd like in our policy. It isn't there, but it is a very good way of summing up an extension to a dwelling overall to all our policies. So yes, really satisfied with on average.
Thank you. Any comments on that, David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's some interesting appeal decisions here, but I'd like to concentrate on the land off Low Hill Road in Wem, and also the one land to the south of Neil Brace Retail Park, because I think there are significant issues here, which I think the committee ought to be aware of, really. Firstly, both of these decisions, I think, were delegated, and I have a constant concern that not too many decisions are delegated to officers and not enough decisions come to this committee. And I think both of them should have come to this committee first. The second thing which concerns me, I think, is that we debated both these applications, and there was quite strong views expressed against these applications. And yet, judging by looking at their appeal reports of the inspector, it seems to me that that the planning officers are putting forward their own particular views on these applications, and the views of the committee which have been expressed have not been put forward. And I feel that in future, when we discuss something at committee, then it goes forward to a planning appeal. I think the views of the committee should be included within the representations made to the inspector. As far as I can tell from the information I've received, and I think that if we do take a strong view, I think that particularly on the Wem, where it was outside the boundary, and particularly on the retail park, where there were significant concerns about highways, which the inspector didn't seem to cover at all. The main concern was expressed that backing for park and ride, for example. There was no reference to the problems that people are going to be facing in Neil Brace as a result of this decision, because there'll be significantly more congestion in this area as a result of this planning application being approved. So I want to put that on record, and perhaps somebody in the office might want to respond, but I am very concerned about this.
Thank you, David.
I'd like to respond, and also defer to our solicitor after. I can comment on the one at Low Hill Web, because I was actually the case officer. And yes, it was delegated. Members will recall a subsequent application was made on this application, and it came to committee. It was deferred, and it was brought back, and you were able to refuse it. The first application was in accordance with the scheme of delegation, which I'm sure the member is aware of in the Constitution. We followed the Constitution. It did not trigger the need to come to committee. That application was subject to review and the scheme of delegation. Then the appellants decided to appeal it. However, they also made a subsequent application, which members had at committee. And that application was refused at committee, but this earlier application that already was going through the appeal process. That was made very clear at committee to be fair and to be quite frank with you, I'm not surprised with the officer, with the inspector's decision, and to say that we don't follow the committee decision in any appeal, I cannot share that comment with you. As far as I'm concerned, and all officers for that matter, if this committee has made a recommendation or a decision, well then we follow what is said. That is the decision of the council. And if I had an officer in my team that was ignoring that and taking out their own personal views, I wouldn't be very happy. The second site at Meal Brace is was included in the revised local plan, which is going to consultation now for inclusion in the local plan for residential development. I don't think anyone can argue it is a sustainable location, albeit it was outside the development limit. I say it's a sustainable location in relation to adjacent services. However, it was in the current local plan outside. That was made very clear. I also attended this appeal hearing myself with the case officer and the planning policy manager. We were up against a leading UK barrister in that appeal hearing, and we put up the best fight we could. We haven't got resources to start employing barristers to attend hearings, but I can assure you we did the best we could. Like I said, you don't win them all, and I do appreciate that this site is sustainable in its location. If there isn't anything I've covered, I'm sure Miranda will touch on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Miranda, would you like to say a few words?
Well, I think it's just to reiterate what Philip said. I mean, the appeal that was for the Low Hill one in Wem that was under consideration was delegated refusal, not the one that came before members. So, you know, the officers had to focus in the appeal on the reasons for refusal that had been given in that delegated refusal. What members had subsequently said in relation to a different application that came before you subsequently couldn't be brought into those reasons for refusal because that wasn't the decision that was before the appeal. And clearly, because officers were decided that they were recommending a refusal for that first application, it didn't meet the trigger to go to committee because the local member and the parish council, that was the outcome that they were seeking. In terms of the other one, the Meal Brace, I can't actually recall if it came to committee in the first place. No, because again, that was a delegated refusal, so the officers would have been dealing with the reasons for refusal that they had put forward for refusing that matter. So it was the question of not taking account of members' views. And further, it is also important to note that in the Constitution, responding to appeals is indeed a delegated matter.
I'd also like to add, even with delegated matters, I do encourage officers to work with a local member, whether it's going to committee or not. So we have to follow the Constitution. We have the draft agenda meetings where the chair and vice look at every application in conjunction with us to decide on material considerations for the applications coming before you in committee.
Just to back Philip up there, we do take into consideration the local members' thoughts very closely. And we are hopefully going to get a member of each over time of inviting members to come to our pre-agenda meeting one at a time so you can see how the process works. I think that's been put forward. So
yeah, if we did it all at once, we could just call it a planning meeting and not have this one.
Thank you. Not. Joyce.
Can I just say that I absolutely appreciate what our planning officers do, what they have to go through. I have found that they always work with me. And if you have a member who doesn't work with the planners, then I'm urging you to take things up with your councillor. Thank you.
Yeah, we always try and find out what the local member says. Vince.
Well, just to add to that, obviously I'm not vice chair anymore, you sat me. Mark's doing a fine job from what I understand.
But it is I wouldn't say a difficult balance, it's an obvious balance really, you know. one of the things that would trigger something being brought to committee would be if the parish council local member had a different view. Quite often the local member doesn't bother to respond unless it's politically sensitive and they've been pushed to, and they normally, I mean, there have been times when local members have said, you know, I want this one to go to committee, but, you know, quietly I support it, but I've got to be seen to not be supporting it. And that does happen, you know. And then I think the other thing too is parish councillors can trigger it coming to committee, providing if the officers want to refuse it, they want to pass it, or vice versa. But the amount of times you get stuff through from a parish council that has no foot whatsoever in planning law, we don't like it, we don't like the applicant built something like that in Derbyshire, or just no comment, that's not going to trigger the need to bring it to committee. It can't trigger the need to bring it to committee because it's not the adjacent view to the one that officers have taken. All of our policies are relatively subjective, and you have to be able to put forward an argument, and a parish council has to be able to put forward an argument based in policy that says, well, that's maybe what you think as an officer, but we as a member, or we as a parish council interpret this slightly differently. And that's something then that this committee can get its teeth into and discuss, so we can come to an informed decision, again rooted in policy, about whether we agree with the officers' essentially interpretation of the policies, or whether we can say, well, actually, no, we don't necessarily agree with that. We interpret this in a slightly different way. It's not easy. It's a difficult job. I think the officers do an excellent job. By and large, we don't always get it right. That's what this committee's for. And Miranda's always very doggedly making sure that we put the correct reasons forward that will be defensible should it go to appeal, which quite often they do. But it's not easy, and I think you'll do a good job. Thank you.
Can I just comment? I do think with the power that the planner's got, with the delegated powers they've got, we do need more transparency, and that's why I was trying to get that you all come to a pre-agenda meeting to see how it all works. It's not smoke and mirrors. I've spoken to Mike Isherwood already about it. Hopefully next meeting, when Paul finally comes back from abroad again,
he's been away for 20 years.
We'll get one. You probably won't be able to say anything. You can just watch what goes on and see how we come to the decisions that we're doing. So I think that would open it out quite nicely for everybody.
Yeah, but it will be one side. David?
Yeah, thanks very much. I would welcome more involvement. Those proposals which you just outlined, I think are good ones, and I think it would be good to have members more involved in those where they have relevant interests at stake. But on the WEM issue, the problem was that the original decision was delegated. It was supported by the town council, I think the local member, but then the planning officers changed their mind in terms of the subsequent revisions to that application, and they then supported it. And I think the local people and the local member don't think supported it at that stage. So you have and the appeal, I know, was on the original application, not on the second one, which went forward to planning committee, and which we made a decision on. So I do think there needs to be consideration given to where the planning officers change their recommendation, make a recommendation which is supported by a local member and a parish council. If they change their mind, then it ought to come back to committee, I think, before it goes forward.
I'd just like to add, I said officers, me in particular, I'm not into doing U-turns or changing my mind. The fact is, we refused the first application because the applicants thought put an application in together and it lacked information. It was refused owing to lack of information. However, I have to commend the inspector who dealt with that appeal. He gave Wem Town Council extra time owing to the circumstances and the second application that was refused at committee. Time to comment on the application, and he did take into consideration objections raised by you as members of this planning committee in relation to the second application. So I have no problem with how the application was assessed. It just so happened that perhaps the applicants weren't the easiest to deal with. However, they submitted two applications, so I do genuinely believe everybody had a fair crack of the whip to put their points of view to the inspector, and he subsequently come to the decision that he did. And I'd just like to add, I am aware the vice chair and the chair, or the vice chair in particular, has made a suggestion that you attend a draft agenda meeting to see how it all works, which I have no objection to, but I do believe it will be for observation purposes only. We have to be very careful that we follow procedures.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Quick one, Vince.
Well, only just to follow up, and I will do it quickly on what Philip said. I do remember that particular application, and the applicants did not put forward, I think it was landscaping stuff at the time, so officers had no choice but to refuse at that point in time. They then held a gun to officers' head and said, well, we're going to put in another application, and if you don't, if it's not approved, then if it's approved, we'll stop the appeal going through, and if it's not approved, which it obviously didn't get, then you know, we would continue with that appeal. And you can't have the tail wagging the dog. It's not right and proper that developers think they can get away with it, but at the time the information wasn't there, so I completely support the decision that officers made. They then subsequently produced it, changed the application a little bit to try and make it different.
Yeah, but if you remember the meeting, that members were warned what would happen.
Yep.
Shall we?
Do you want to end the live session?
Yes, please.
Yes, 10 minutes ago.
Well, no, it's not the agenda yet, which is number 10. So now the next meeting, the North Planning Committee, will be held 2 p.m. on Tuesday, 29th of March. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I thought we had some good debates today. I found it a good meeting. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody.